go to a lot of different law firms and get a lot of different internships because I think the biggest thing when you decide to be a lawyer, there's so many areas. So it's not one area or one job is the same for every single person.
I'm Michael Coker, a personal injury lawyer with over 15 years' experience practicing Georgia law, and this is the Georgia Legal Talks podcast. Today we have a special treat. We have attorney Samantha Ball is with us today, and we're going to kind of talk a little bit with Samantha about what it means to be a lawyer, kind of what things, maybe if you're somebody who wants to go to law school and wants to be a lawyer, kind of what should you know, and then kind of talk about the day-to-day, like what is a lawyer experience. And so, Samantha, let's kind of start off. Just if you could kind of introduce yourself, talk a little bit about you, where are you from, where'd you grow up, and kind of why'd you become a lawyer?
Yeah, so my name is Samantha. I grew up in Beaufort, Georgia. So I went to school in Gwinnett County and I'm still living in Gwinnett County. I wanted to be a lawyer because I was obsessed with the show Matlock as a kid. And so I couldn't stop watching it. And I thought he was just such a great person. And I was like, that's what I want to be when I get older. So I actually stuck to it. And I think I started watching that show in second grade, which I don't know if that was good for like a second grader to be watching Matlock, but I continued with it and decided to go all the way to law school and now just kind of living out my dream.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the law school process, right? So if maybe we have some listeners out there that maybe one day they're like, I want to be a lawyer. Can you talk a little about the schooling that's required to be a lawyer, the process, kind of any tests you have to take? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so becoming a lawyer is a very long process. Not to deter anyone, but I do remember when I was in school, I was like, okay, I have to go through 4 years of undergrad and then I have to sit for an exam to get into law school. Obviously, your grades and everything like that count as well. And then you go to law school and you have to take an exam to become a lawyer. So law school's 3 years, undergrad's 4 years, and then you take an exam to be a lawyer. And typically in Georgia, at least, you don't know if you've passed the bar exam or anything until probably about 6 months after graduation. You can't actually start practicing law. I mean, I worked for a law firm, I'm sure you did, but you can't actually start practicing until you get the scores back. So it's quite a long process. I would say it's around 7.5 years, give or take.
And how did you decide to which area of the law you were going to practice? Can you talk a little bit about that? Like what interests you about your area of practice? Can you talk a little bit about what it is, what the day-to-day operations look like?
Yeah, so I came from a very different background when it came to practicing law. So I started in a small firm that did a little bit of everything. So I got to experience a lot of different areas of law. So I got to see the ones that I liked, the ones that I didn't like, and basically based on my experience there, I really enjoyed trial practice. So I enjoy being a trial lawyer. I like going to court because that's the most like the movies. um, so I wanted to focus on an area that was geared towards actually being in trial. I did do a lot of work where I did a lot of bench trials before becoming a personal injury lawyer, and I did do some trials while I was doing criminal law and other things, but that's kind of what geared me towards personal injury law. And I would say, kind of day to day practice, it is a little bit different in this realm versus in the other realm that I was in, which is criminal and domestic. There's a lot less time in court daily, but when you're in court, it's for a long period of time, if that makes sense.
So talk to somebody who maybe is wanting to become a lawyer, right? So if this is something you've thought about, how can that person figure out what area of law interests them the most?
I would say try to go to a lot of different law firms and get a lot of different internships because I think the biggest thing when you decide to be a lawyer, there's so many areas. So it's not one area or one job is the same for every single person. So I would say go to different firms that practice different areas of law and get, internships there, determine which one you like the most, and then kind of take it from there. I mean, personally, for me, I mean, it took me practicing law to really decide what I wanted to do. So, I mean, I didn't know coming out of law school what area I liked more than others. I actually had to kind of get my feet wet, have some trials, figure out which area I liked best and which area I felt like I was helping people the most.
And so if you're somebody, like I said, let's say you're out there and maybe you don't understand what the different types of law are. I mean,
Sure.
you've dropped a bunch of names, right? You said domestic, you said, I think you talked about personal injury, you talked about maybe contracts or real estate. Can you just kind of talk a little bit about if I'm somebody who's never hired a lawyer before, what would I need to what types of law are there, and who should I hire if I need to hire a law firm?
Yeah, I would say in this day and age, I think it's important to hire a firm that does specifically whatever area you're looking for. I think the jack of all trades firms or the small firms that kind of do everything is kind of going out. So I would, whatever case you may have, if you have a divorce case, get a divorce lawyer. If you have a criminal case, get a criminal lawyer that specifically practices criminal law. If you have a personal injury case, get a personal injury lawyer. If you have a contracts dispute case, get a contracts or a business attorney, somebody that handles like business disputes. And then real estate, I think a lot of people deal with real estate just with buying and selling homes. There's specifically transactional real estate attorneys that just do closings, and then there's also real estate attorneys that do real estate litigation. So there's a lot of different areas, and that is not all inclusive. There's still, you could be an in-house counsel. I mean, there's so many different areas of law that you can do, but those are just a few that like I've personally experienced.
And you said that the areas of law, or the we'll call them the general practitioners, right?
Mhm.
Those that do a little bit of everything. You said that's going out. What do you mean by that, and why do you think that's happening?
I think that nowadays a lot of people want someone who is very good at what they do in the sense that that's all that they do. So I think the days of going to an attorney that does everything is kind of going out of style. Now, that could also be because we live in a very a large county or a large area. So I think that maybe in some of these smaller counties, these attorneys kind of do a little bit of everything because I think it might be hard to make a living doing one area. So, but in my experience out here or like Metro Atlanta, you can find an attorney that specializes in that area that has a ton of experience in that particular type of law. And that's who I would hire if it was me. Like, I'm getting, estate planning done by another lawyer. I'm not doing it myself. So if I were to, you know, need a criminal lawyer, divorce lawyer, or contracts lawyer, like I would go hire somebody else. I wouldn't do it.
So that's interesting. So you're saying you're a lawyer yourself, and you said like a will you would not do yourself. You would go to a specialist and a state lawyer who specialized in that.
Yeah, especially if it's like
Interesting.
estate planning. I mean, I might write like a simple will, but just as far as estate planning, I'm gonna go with somebody else.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I know that you predominantly practice personal injury law. Can you talk a little bit about why it's important to find a personal injury lawyer as opposed to maybe someone who does estate planning, real estate, and personal injury? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's important to hire a lawyer that does just what you need them to do because, especially in personal injury law, the laws are ever changing. So you need someone that's actually going to keep up with the times and know what's different. I've seen a lot of different lawyers that do different areas of law, and it's hard to keep up with. I mean, to be completely honest, if you practice more than one area of law as one person, it's very difficult to keep up with the changing laws, the just actually being in court. It's very hard to do multi areas of law if you have like a high caseload. So I would say that's something that, is important when hiring somebody, knowing that they do this certain area of law because you know that they're very up to date with, the new laws. I mean, that's something huge in our field right now. So I think that's something important to keep in mind.
What makes you different as a personal injury lawyer? I mean, obviously, you can drive down the interstate and see thousands of billboards for personal injury lawyer. You know, hey, hire me, or I can get you this big check, or hey, I'm out there, and this is why I'm the best lawyer in Georgia. If you were to look at somebody and say why Samantha Ball is different from every one of those lawyers, what would you say?
I would say the biggest thing for me that's different is when you hire me, you're getting me. So I think a lot of times, you see these big billboards and there's somebody's face like plastered on it, but that's not who you're getting. That's not the attorney that's actually going to be doing your case. Like when you hire our firm, you're getting one of us. So that's, I believe, like, kind of the personal touch that we give. And I think is important. I also think that, when you hire a lawyer, you don't know what their experience is. I mean, the difference between them and us is we've tried cases. So we know what a case value is pre-suit versus a case that actually needs to be tried. So I think a lot of times you can get these kind of lawyers that have never tried a case, so they think either it's ready to settle or they need to settle it, or they think I'm just going to send it to somebody else to try the case when in reality it should have been one that should have been settled, just, kind of based on case metrics, right? So I think that's kind of the biggest difference between us and somebody else.
You talked a little bit about trials, and you talked a lot about kind of courtroom drama and TV shows. Do you have any trial stories or trial experiences that you think our audience would find interesting or fascinating of cases you've tried, or things that may have happened in court, or even just one or two things that you might think would be a good tip, maybe even for another lawyer who's maybe a little bit younger, who's just starting out? Can you talk a little bit about maybe one or two of those trials and kind of your experience?
Yeah, so I would say the best thing about trials is you never know what you're getting with a jury or with clients or any witnesses, right? Sometimes we know what they're going to say or do, and then other times we don't. So, one of my favorite trial stories is recently I had a trial last year, and the defendant that I was against, obviously, in the bathroom was like, "You're such a great lawyer. You really know how to talk to people, and you know how to make your voice loud when needed." And I was like, "Oh, thanks. I'm just doing my job, like representing my client. Like that was nice." The verdict hadn't come back yet, right? So then the verdict comes back, and obviously I win, and she yells at me leaving the courthouse, like very upset. And I'm like, wow, that's like so different from the person in the bathroom that was like, "You're a great lawyer," you know? And then she's leaving the courthouse, like slamming the door, being like so angry that she lost. And it was really funny. And the defense attorney was like, I didn't know she was gonna do that.
Yeah, I know. And sometimes that does happen, unfortunately, right? Defendants
Yeah.
take it so personally, which I don't understand because
Yeah.
they almost always have insurance, right? So it's
Yeah.
you're really just going against the insurance
Yeah.
company. Like, yeah, I understand that you might have caused the accident or you might have been the one who ultimately has to sit at the chair, right? But at
Right.
the end of the day, insurance is covering every penny of that. So I don't understand why sometimes they take it so personally, but
Right.
I
Right.
I bet that's one of those situations for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about maybe your family? Do you have any lawyers in your family? And kind of how did that shape you into wanting to practice law?
No, I don't have any lawyers in my family. I was actually the first person in my family to graduate college.
Wow.
So, yeah, no lawyers. My grandmother was a great businesswoman. She didn't graduate from college, but she owned a couple businesses and did very well for herself, and she was a very hard worker. So, I mean, I think a lot of my work ethic comes from her. And yeah, I did have an aunt that went to school and went back to school and became a teacher. But I have never had anyone in my family go like further than that. If that makes undergrad, I guess, if that makes
So
sense.
so being the first person in your family to graduate college, right? And then obviously you talked a little bit about your grandmother being a very successful
Yeah.
businesswoman. How would you say those two things shape the type of lawyer that you are today?
I think you know, I have like a real understanding of what people need a lot of the times because I'm not just somebody that just comes from a bunch of lawyers that went to school to be a lawyer and is just kind of this generational thing where they don't really have like concept of reality. I'm not saying all generational lawyers are like that, but I had to work hard to get where I am, and I continue to work hard, and I can kind of relate to a lot of the situations that my clients are in because I understand like struggling and needing to actually pay for medical bills and stuff like that. Nobody's going to really help you. And so I think that's the biggest thing that it's taught me. And obviously just the process of becoming a lawyer is very hard and it's very time consuming. And I think that that kind of molds you um, to become a great lawyer. I don't necessarily think that like school is always the answer. And I don't necessarily think that school taught me how to be a lawyer. I think that just the process of becoming a lawyer and how tough that was as far as like how long it took. I mean, the tough part about it was just I mean, years and years without making money really other than, side jobs or work in a restaurant or something like that. I think that's like the biggest thing that, a lot of people don't see from lawyers is like just how much time it actually takes to get to this point. So, to me, I really wanted it, or I wouldn't have taken that much time. I would have gone out in the workforce and actually started making money and retirement and things like that. But, I had to take a lot of extra time actually to become a lawyer.
Okay. Well, that pretty much concludes today's episode. I mean, thanks for being here, Samantha. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, we learned a lot about the process of becoming a lawyer, like what people might expect when they want to be a lawyer, how to find the right area of practice. Is there anything else you might want to share with our audience of that process of becoming a lawyer, or how your background kind of shaped you into the person you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything else to share, but I would say if you're thinking about being a lawyer, just do it. I mean, if we can do it, anybody can. I mean, there's a lot of lawyers that can do it, and there's a lot of lawyers that can't. But I just think if you just like try as hard as you can, you'll get it done. I mean, a lot of people I know get discouraged. So,
Yeah,
I mean, it's kind of
sounds
a
good.
tough process. I know friends that have kind of gone through and then they're like, yeah, I'm going to be a lawyer. Then they're like, no, I'm not.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
No, I
just
agree.
keep trying.
I agree 100%. So, all right, everybody. Well, thank you for joining us. This has been the Georgia Legal Talks podcast. Again, my name is Michael Coker. This is Samantha Ball. We're a couple local personal injury lawyers in Lawrenceville, Georgia. If we can ever help you, feel free to give us a call. But otherwise, if you like what you're hearing and you want to learn more just about the legal profession or about trials or about the day to day of what a lawyer's life is like, feel free to like and subscribe, and we'll give you plenty of episodes where you can learn more.